So my sister's boyfriend recently upgraded his computer and gave me his old Nvidia GTX 660 Ti. If you watch this, thank you a lot. I really appreciate it, and these kind of cards are really fun for me to play around with and test out, so thank you. So this got me to thinking, how does this old Nvidia graphics card play games in 2022? To give some background, the card came out in the fall of 2012, making it almost 10 years old. The card was built off of the Kepler architecture and came with 2 GB of GDDR5 memory. This card can be had for about $90 on eBay right now, but sadly the driver support for these cards ended last year. Though they will still continue to receive security updates for a couple more years, so they're definitely still usable to some extent. So how does the GTX 660 Ti play games in 2022? For testing, I paired the 660 Ti with a Ryzen 7 2700X and 32 GB of RAM. This is the best system I have currently, so I wanted to see what it could do. If you want me to test the card with lower end hardware in the future, let me know down in the comments. I first wanted to test some esports titles because those are generally easier to run and the games I play most often. I started with good old Overwatch, and to my surprise, it ran pretty smoothly. I did set the graphics quality to low, but to be honest, if I didn't have the FPS counter on, I don't know that I would be able to tell the difference between the 660 Ti or my RX 580. Looking at the actual numbers, the FPS seems to sit in the 130s generally, with a 1% low dropping down to the high 80s. I also tried Rainbow Six Siege, and the game played pretty smoothly as well. It didn't feel or look quite as good as Overwatch to me, but it was still a very decent experience. At 1080p low settings with the in-game benchmark, the average FPS sat at 126 while the minimum sat around 77. I wanted to test out some newer titles that were more graphically intensive as well, and this ended up being where the card kind of showed its weakness. In Far Cry 5, I could get around 30 FPS at 1080p low settings with frame time numbers that made it feel pretty choppy. I think the card was suffering from only having 2 GB of VRAM, so lowering the resolution down to 900p seemed to solve the issue for the most part. And it also bumped the average FPS up to the high 50s. Not the best experience, but it could get you by if you really wanted to play the game. I also tested out Borderlands 3, which on the low preset felt pretty stuttery and slow as well, running between 30 and 40 FPS. I tested the very low preset and the game felt much smoother. With the in-game benchmark, it got an average of 76 FPS. Doesn't look amazing, but it could definitely get you by. Another game I wanted to try out was Halo Infinite, but sadly the game doesn't work on this graphics card. I get an error message that said that the hardware is unsupported, and after a few Google searches, it looks like the GTX 660 Ti doesn't fully support DX12, so there may be some compatibility issues with some more modern games. Lastly, I tested Fortnite because I know everybody's going to be curious. It's been a while since I've played, so don't make fun of me too much. First I tested on the high preset, and the FPS stuck around the high 30s and low 40s, with a 1% low sitting around the 20s. I then tried low settings, with the view distance set to far, and the average FPS sat around 100, with 1% lows in the 40s. Overall, it was a good experience. So that was all the games I tested, but I did want to mention that if you stumble across one of these cards for cheap and you play mostly older games or esports games, then it might be a good budget GPU for you. But it probably wouldn't be my first choice if you're building a system from used parts. With its age and recently discontinued driver support, other options would probably suit you better. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments down below, and also don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!